Do you love a good mystery? So do I, and I have several favorites that I'd like to share with you today. Let's talk. Welcome, I'm Amy, and I am a slightly international woman of mystery, meaning that I've lived a lot of places and I love a lot of mysteries. And I would like to share with you some favorites, and I'm calling this a very partial list, but I've got sort of a top 9 for the moment. It's liable to change at any given time, but let's see what we got. First off, one of my favorite mystery series that I've enjoyed reading so much is a series called A Singaporean Mystery by Ovidia Yu. And the first book in the series is called Auntie Lee's Delights. This is about an older woman who has retired and now runs as sort of a hobby. She runs a restaurant where she enjoys making favorite Singaporean treats, and specifically Peranakan treats, which is part of the whole mix of cultures of that part of the world. And she solves mysteries that have to do with modern day life in Singapore and how it comes out of past histories of Singapore. I have sort of an obsession with Singapore. I love to watch videos about Singapore. I love to learn about Singapore in the news. And so reading a mystery series about something that happens there that describes the culture, the way people live, how people live in different social classes, different economic classes, what it's like to live in that particular climate where it's right by the equator and it's really warm all year round. How do people live and adapt? It was just a fascinating sort of cultural dive into a place that I would love to visit someday. And when you add in a layer of a mystery, and each book in the series includes a murder victim, and then she solves it with the help of a friendly police officer and her maid and a lot of other people who come into the thing as just colorful characters. If you're interested in a mystery that's set in a different culture to yours, unless of course you're from Singapore, in which case it might be very familiar, but I would recommend that you try the Auntie Lee series. An older woman in Singapore solves mysteries and teaches us a lot about Singapore. Second on this list, and by the way, these are in no particular order of importance, I just, as they came into my head, is, oh yeah, that's a favorite. Oh yeah, that's a favorite. And I finally had to stop at 9 because I could have gone on to 20 or more. But for now, second on this list is Murder at the Vicarage, the very first Miss Marple, written by Agatha Christie. It is a classic of classics of the genre. Agatha Christie, of course, helped to set the tone and set the scene and set the whole set of parameters for how we read mysteries today. And Miss Marple's whole trajectory as someone who solves mysteries really starts here with Murder at the Vicarage. There are elements of this that I have talked about in previous videos where you see the sort of casual racism and casual sexism that is of that time and of that place. And sometimes it's troubling, but I have another Agatha Christie coming up that I want to talk about, how you see something different. And Agatha Christie has such a complex perspective on the human condition that I think I didn't realize until recently. But I think when you look at the different characters in the very classic Murder at the Vicarage, the person died and everybody's got to figure out what happened. And it's really quite dramatic. This tiny little village, these sweet little family scenes, the gossip of the neighbors. And then there's just this drama that seems to be dropped in from nowhere, and it's very heavy, but the ending is light and frothy and delightful and sweet, and Miss Marple solves yet another mystery right at the end. So if you want to try Agatha Christie and for some reason you haven't, I think you really can't go wrong by starting with Murder at the Vicarage. So now moving on to number 3, I want to talk to you about a book that gave me a whole different perspective on how Agatha Christie might have seen the world. I am not an Agatha Christie scholar, I just read some of her books sometimes. This one is Hercule Poirot number 20, Hercule Poirot's Christmas. In this book, Simeon Lee is murdered and horrible things happen. He was a horrible man. All of the people around him seem to be pretty horrible. And as I started reading this book, I was like, she just has a way of describing somebody seemingly just by their appearance. Like one word, she says this one character has a head like an egg. And for some reason, the way that she writes conversations and descriptions, they're simple. They're 1 or 2 words. They're a phrase here and there. But it gives you a sense of who that person is. She had a skill that I don't know how to describe. And what she did here was to describe people who are having a bad time. I was talking to a family member about this, and this person was telling me about this sort of vast genre of rich white people having a very bad time, and it's one of those mysteries. They didn't deserve their wealth. They all do deserve what's happening to them, and Hercule Poirot is there to solve it and untangle it. And at the end, nobody really gets a happy ending because these are not good people. And this is where what I had seen as like the casual racism in Murder at the Vicarage kind of gets turned around. And in Hercule Poirot's Christmas, what you see is all of these people who have done really bad things or are too young to have done it, but they're willing to try. These are people about whom Agatha Christie points out the heinous behavior, the heinous racism that they have practiced over the course of their lives in order to get the wealth they have, in order to keep the wealth they have. And I found myself really shocked at how precise and how accurate her description was. And it gave me a sense of, again, the complexity of Agatha Christie here. I feel like I'm not necessarily doing this justice. I would say if you want a grim, dark, but quick and easy-paced read at Christmas time next year, or anytime you're thinking about Christmas and you want a good murder mystery, I really recommend Hercule Poirot's Christmas. Number 4 is a series about a translator who translates primarily between English and Spanish. Her name is Cassandra Riley, and Cassandra Riley ends up being a detective, sort of like an amateur detective in her travels. My favorite of the books in the series that I have read is the second one, Trouble in Transylvania. It's the first one that I read, and while I really, really love the others, each one has its charm and each one has its real sense of place because each one is set in a different location. Cassandra Riley is a traveling translator, and so she travels, and in each new place you get a new mystery. Trouble in Transylvania is very complicated, talks about the history of Romania leading up to the time when this book was written, which would have been, I think, the late 1980s, early 1990s. And it talks about feminist and lesbian history, both as seen from a perspective of somebody from the United States. Cassandra Riley grew up Catholic and ran away from home and just doesn't have any contact with her family because they don't want to talk to her because she's gay. And she travels all around the world. She lives the life that she wants to live with great passion, and she always meets a new woman in every port, so she's never lonely. And what we see in this book is a mystery that is centered around what happens when a country has been oppressed and starts to come out of oppression, and people are still very vulnerable, and somebody might want to take advantage of it. Is that okay, or how are we feeling about it? I recommend the story. It's funny, it's sweet, it's sexy, it's queer, and it's a mystery. So Trouble in Transylvania. Number 5 on this list of 9 of my current favorites is the 7th book in the Kate Delafield mysteries by Catherine V. Forrest, and this one is called Sleeping Bones. The stories about Kate Delafield, written by Catherine V. Forrest, are set 20 to 30 years ago as of present day, but they were written to be contemporary to the time in which they were written, if that makes sense. So you have a middle-aged lesbian woman who works on the police force in Berkeley, California, and so you have all of these sort of interacting complexities to her life because she's gay and she didn't used to be out and she's only partially out because it's not quite safe to be totally out in the world that she lives in. Her partner lives a whole different, more artistic life and is much more free-flowing. And Kate has all of these sort of personal demons that she fights related to how to live an honest life, the grief that she feels from having lost her previous partner in a horrible traffic accident. And that predates the series. We don't ever hear about it except when she's talking about it in therapy. But she has been really broken by that. And then she has to go and solve murder mysteries, and they are quite horrible. Sleeping Bones is about the La Brea tar pits and about bones that are found there that aren't dinosaur bones. She has some moments of weakness where she ends up almost having an affair with somebody else. She's a complicated character, and she thinks a lot. Catherine V. Forrest, as a writer, she's one of my favorite writers of conversations, and also, although I don't particularly enjoy reading a lot of like close-up intimacy type scenes, she writes those in a way that I really enjoy reading them. Anything that is about people communicating and connecting. She writes beautifully. She also keeps the pacing of her stories very clear, and you always know that something is going to be complex. This set of mysteries is not exactly in the cozy mystery genre. It's more in the police procedural genre, so you do get a bit more grime and not gore, but you do see, like on the page, you see horrible things happening to people. If you want something that's deep and rich and complex and has a history within the lesbian community, Catherine V. Forrest is one of the most celebrated lesbian writers of the 20th century and possibly going into the 21st. It's worth reading because these are sort of modern classics of queer literature. As we move on, I want to make a pause here to say thank you to those of you who are joining in as I get started on an experiment, a whole new experiment in my life of talking about books on YouTube. It is a joy to speak with you every other week and to share my videos with you, and thank you so much for coming along on the ride. If you have just chanced upon this video and you think you might like to know more, please do subscribe and give me a like. Talk to me down below in the comments. Tell me what you're reading. I am so interested in all of the things that might be happening in your book world, and I can't wait for more. All right, let's keep going. Number 6, I have a twofer for you. The Glory Broussard Mysteries, both number 1 and number 2, by author Danielle Arsenault. The first one is called Glory Be, and the second one is called Glory Daze, D-A-Z-E. Both of these books trace the life and the world of Glory Broussard, who lives in a small town in Louisiana. She's a probably slightly older than me Black woman who lives in a community that is primarily African American. Danielle Arsenault's way of writing the murder mystery part of each of these really incorporates elements of the culture in which this town lives. It's very self-sufficient, very, I don't want to say isolated, because they're certainly not isolated, but there's this feeling that this is our town, this is our little world. And when bad things happen in our little world, we got to figure out what's going on. And there's also themes that go through the two books where Glory really has suffered a lot in her life personally because of her ex-husband. And she is able to come to terms with that in a very special and unique way that I think was written with great sensitivity toward her own suffering, great sensitivity toward her daughter, great sensitivity toward the woman who ended up with her ex-husband. Danielle Arsenault took this very complex and difficult and extraordinarily painful experience that this woman had gone through and turned it into a path leading towards healing, leading into empowerment, and leading to strength in a way that was really authentic and let Glory discover some vulnerability and not have to be armored all the time. And I loved that aspect of it almost more than the murder mysteries, which quite frankly were very interesting, but which I've kind of forgotten because I loved her personal story over these two mysteries. So if you read one, definitely go on and read the other. Now we have something totally different, The Examiner by Janice Hallett. I listened to this on audiobook and I found it to be a revelation. The Examiner is the story of a cohort of students who enter a master's program in art, and the art master's is entirely project-based, and the cohort needs to work both together on group projects and separately on their own individual projects. There is a murder that happens. Janice Hallett writes with a multimedia strategy. So there are texts, there are phone calls, there are lots of ways that people communicate, emails, and the story is told through those. I almost want to call it like a classic epistolary novel where it's told through letters, but it's not quite that specific. It's any form of communication that we use nowadays is used to tell the story. And I just don't want to say any more than that because the twist at the end shocked me and I was like, oh, and it was one of those twists that I didn't see coming. And I don't tend to try to guess the mystery. I know some people are, but I'm not that person who goes and guesses the mystery. But this one I was like, oh, this is a shocker. And then all of the dominoes just fell for me, and I could see all the way back to the beginning of the story. What was happening was not what I thought was happening. I loved it. I would love for you to experience it for yourself. So I'm just not going to tell you anymore, but I'm going to say, if you love a mystery, if you love something that's complicated in the way that it is described, but yet is done in such a way that you can really follow it, and if you like a big twist, The Examiner by Janice Hallett. Almost there, almost there. Now, number 8, The Baby Ganesh Agency Investigations by Vasim Khan is a series about a detective who ends up inheriting an elephant. He lives in India, but he lives in a city Is there room for an elephant in his apartment complex? Both he and his wife would like to know. And the elephant, for some almost sort of magical realism reason, tends to be a help in solving the mysteries. The first book in the series is literally called The Unexpected Inheritance of Inspector Chopra. And Inspector Chopra inherits the elephant and has to solve a mystery. And he ends up with this lovely little ragtag bunch of family and friends and chosen family who ends up working together over the course of the series. Each one of the mysteries is a standalone, and you could probably start in any of them. I'm not sure how many there are. There are several. You could probably just read any of them as a standalone and enjoy it, because it really is its own little murder mystery, sort of a cozy mystery type of a feel. And you get a flavor for the city that he lives in India. You get a flavor for the family that he lives in. The descriptions of the food are quite delicious and make me very hungry. So maybe have a snack before you sit down to eat. And the elephant is, I don't know, just adorable. So if you enjoy a cozy type murder mystery with a little police procedural, if you like to read stories about India, and if you want to see how an elephant investigates murder, then try these out. Kills Well with Others by Deanna Raybourn. Deanna Raybourn doesn't usually write this kind of murder situation. She usually writes more romance-themed novels, and I read an article where she said that she had this idea and thought it wasn't going to go anywhere, but her agent said, give it a try, and it's become a hit, and it's become the first in a series. There's at least 2 out right now, and my favorite one of the ones that she has released is the first one, Kills Well with Others. We have a group of 4 women. They are in their 60s. They were recruited back during the Cold War era to go and assassinate people who had not been justly tried for their war crimes during World War II. Well, eventually, the supply of those guys ran out. And so they just became a hired hit group. And now they're trying to retire, but something is going on, and they are about to become the murder victims. What happens when a group of 60-plus-year-old women who have been assassins for 40 years have targets on their backs and they decide they're not going to take it? I loved this book. I loved the description of what it's like to age into and through and out of a career, to just want to retire, but to realize you gotta keep going because you gotta stay alive. And finally, Murder by Memory by Olivia Waite. I have talked about this. This is the first in a series of space opera detective novels about a detective named Dorothy Gentleman. These are novellas, so they're quite short. The first one, I just finished listening to it again. I love the audiobook version of this. Dorothy Gentleman was 57 about 300 years ago. And she has, over the course of traveling through space for 300 years on an intergenerational ship, she has transferred her consciousness into several different bodies and led several different lives. In this particular iteration, she wakes up in a new life, but not in a body that was made for her, in somebody else's body that somebody else was supposed to be in at the time. And then she has to go and solve the murder. And it involves money and people in an egalitarian society who want to take power through money. So if you like space operas, if you like science fiction, if you like people talking to sentient spaceships, if you like older women as protagonists, if you like queer and lesbian themes incorporated as just a random element that is just a feature and not something to be discussed except as that's who your partner is, this might be for you. If you want a short read that's exciting, engaging, and you gotta follow the money, try Murder by Memory. All right, that was my top 9, I think I said at the beginning of the video, and they ended up with a bonus, so a little bit of extra. If you have some favorite mysteries that I have not talked about, and I know there are many out there in the world, tell me down below. What's your favorite mystery? What do you think I should read next? I can't wait to see you again next time. Bye-bye!